Epilogue. It was a police scanner that woke him up. All units, level 4 mobilization. Location, Fisk Tower. Peter sat straight up in bed. It had been months since the fight at the hotel, and he'd been dreaming about MJ. But he hadn't spoken to her for a long time. He wanted to give her space. That was definitely part of it. But he'd also worried that he could never be the boyfriend she needed. He couldn't stop worrying, and he cared enough to give her the freedom she wanted, rather than hinder her career. As he predicted, Fisk had walked away from the incident with no charges. But that wasn't to say he was untarnished. Footage of him punching Maya Lopez, a woman who had been his legal ward, was all over the national news. A man who was acquitted of criminal charges could remake himself as a scoundrel. But a man who punched his foster daughter on national television was bound to get a lot of negative publicity. It cost him a lot of business. Thanks to Yuri Watanabe, who'd receive a promotion to captain shortly after the incident, links leaked to the press, connecting Fisk to the murderer of Maya's father. Various reporters, like Ben Urich, had written scathing pieces that made it seem as if evidence had been buried by crooked cops at the time. The district attorney was talking about reopening the case. Even J. Jonah Jameson had become interested. He'd switched his show over to a podcast, cutting his ties with Fisk, and he seemed to have more listeners than ever. Fisk remained a free man, but he'd been wounded. They hadn't stopped him that night, not the way they wanted to, but they'd done damage, and that felt pretty good. Now Peter struggled to get his Spider-Man suit on. SWAT is 1084 at Fisk Tower. The police scanner squawked. All units stand by. Warrant is en route. A warrant? Could this really be it? All the work they'd done, and the files provided by Maya Lopez were making a difference. Watanabe kept telling him that. Was it possible that something major had shifted, and they were actually going to take down Fisk? His heart raced as he sped out the window. More importantly, how could Watanabe not tell him? Now that she was a captain, had she forgotten the little people? While swinging toward Hell's Kitchen, the web-slinger used his new in-suit phone to call her. I thought you were going to tell me before taking down the big guy, he said as soon as she picked up. She didn't have to ask who was calling. We think he got wind of it a couple of hours ago, she explained. So we're moving fast. Still waiting on the warrant. Just need to secure one last piece of evidence. What can I do to help? Nothing, she said. This needs to go by the book. You know his lawyers. That didn't slow him down. No way was she going to box him out. Not now. She knew it too. He figured she was just putting up a fight out of procedural instinct. Come on, Yuri, Watanabe said. I've been working the last 8 years on this. Taking down Fisk is kind of a big deal to me. Hold a sec, she said. It sounded as if she was dealing with a crowd of people over there. Launching an assault against a major figure like Fisk had to be a logistical nightmare, especially when he was unlikely to go quietly. Okay, she said when she got back to the phone. Now's your chance. Go to Times Square. Fisk's men are trying to keep my guys from getting to the scene. You got it, he answered quickly before she could change her mind. Thanks, Yuri. Yes! It was going to be part of it. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but think he was already supposed to be at the lab. It turned out that Peyton hadn't had permission to get rid of Peter, so the boss had hired him back and fired Peyton instead. For a while, Peter had actually been pretty good about showing up on time and being where he was supposed to be. He hated to fall into the old habits. But this was Fisk. and some things couldn't wait. The boss was going to be furious with him, but he could live with that. To get Fisk, he could live with almost anything. There was an incoming call from the lab. He hated having these conversations. He hated letting anyone down. Being Spider-Man could be a burden. There were a lot of days when he wanted to set that burden aside. This wasn't one of them. He was going to see Fisk behind bars. And after that, well, he'd deal with it when it happened. He let the phone take the boss's call. Spider-Man flicked his wrist and shot out a web, loving the feeling of hurling himself, not away from anything, but towards something important. He felt alive and electric, full of the joy of movement and action. He wanted to act, needed to act, to be part of making the city a better and more just place. Soon, he thought, when Fisk was finally behind bars, his life would finally calm down. It couldn't get any crazier, right?